From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. On today's program, we have highlights from Wednesday's Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinar with K-State agricultural economist Dan O'Brien and Mark Nelson, Director of Commodities for Kansas Farm Bureau. They've been teaming up for several workshops and webinars across the state, focusing on pre-harvest market pricing principles and strategies. In the first segment, Mark covers pricing increments, targets, and decision dates. And in the second segment, Dan covers some of the issues that could impact the markets in 2023. And K-State climatologist Chip Redmond rounds out today's program with Kansas agricultural weather, which is still seeing wide temperature swings and plenty of wind. It's all just ahead on Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Well, we typically begin the Friday program with a look at the activity taking place in the grain markets with K-State agricultural economist Dan O'Brien. Today, though, we have grain marketing information from Dan and Mark Nelson, Director of Commodities for Kansas Farm Bureau. On Wednesday, they presented a Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinar examining key factors impacting grain markets and marketing decisions. During the first part of the webinar, Nelson discussed the pre-harvest marketing plan for pricing increments, targets, and decision dates that serve as a guide for making decisions.
And when you go through our workshops, that's kind of the three things that we really hit on. Trying to set on relevant pricing targets, pricing increments, and then decision dates to help drive action. When we create a marketing plan, one of the goals is to create a plan that you're not going to need to make many adjustments in, right? We want a plan that we just implement. We want it to be able to handle a lot of situations, but we are seeing some things going on. I think it's like 74.92% of Kansas is either in D1, which is moderate drought, or D4, which is severe drought. And I'd argue that's roughly 90% of Kansas wheat. And so that's a real problem. Now, typically, when I create a plan, I'll kind of say something like, well, let's insure our crop at 80% or 75 or whatever you insure at, and then use that percent of your APH as the bushels that you want to price pre-harvest. And so, I say 80% of APH. If you're insuring at 75, maybe that would be a good target, because the idea there is that those bushels then would be able to, if you didn't produce it, your insurance will cover that. So it should give you the confidence to go ahead and price it. The question that we've all got, though, is, are we going to produce 80%? Are we going to produce 75% of our APH? Because, again, 75% of the state is in D1 to D4 drought. The last crop conditions, 17% of the Kansas crop was in good to excellent. 52% is in poor to very poor conditions. So I think really when we think about our wheat plans, we probably want to think about making some adjustments there. The second thing is pre-harvest plans should include what we call a cost of production-based minimum target price. And we try to say, let's add a little cushion to that, creating a value in which no sales will be made at prices below this. And so I've got a bit of an example here using some cost of production estimates from Kansas State. These basically are the calculated averages for the non-irrigated cost of production over the 6 cropping districts. So northwest, southwest, north central, south central, northeast, southeast. And I just took those and I got the total cost of production, the average yield across the state, and calculated out a cost per bushel. And so sort of a statewide then would be $5.01, soybeans $11.44, and wheat $7.72. Are they exact? Maybe not. Do they reflect everybody individually? Obviously not. But for a state average, I think they're pretty dang good. Then I've got my sample cushions, 49 cents for corn, 56 cents soybeans, 28 for wheat. To just kind of get a round number for my minimum cost of production value. So for corn, I'm using $5.50, $12 for soybeans. Wheat, we're at $8. But the question is, and I've got some concerns here on the wheat, is that going to be really very reflective? A, I started out with a very low cushion, and B, yield potential for a lot of us is probably significantly less than what we thought this time in October. If we take those 6 regions, the average cost per acre was $396. If you take the average yield for all those 6 budgets, it was 51 bushels. So again, in an average year, the average farmer, we're thinking 51 bushels. You break that out at 772. But if we just, use a 10% reduction, that puts it at 46 bushels. That bumps that cost to 858. If we think we're going to see a 20% reduction from average, not from, our high potential, but just from average, that's a 965. So, the question comes in, where is this cost of production based minimum target price now? And I think all producers across Kansas really need to be looking at that and kind of reevaluating if you haven't already. For this budget today, I'm going to use $9. So we're bumping that thing up $1. So again, looking at ensuring 80%, well, hold it. I don't think we're going to produce that. So let's say 60% of APH. So we're making an adjustment. Again, the bottom line is, how many bushels are you pricing? How many bushels do you feel comfortable marketing? One of the things we always say in our workshops, if you're willing to use futures and options, you can really feel comfortable pre-harvest pricing 100% of expected production. But if you're only using pre-harvest tools that require delivery, things like forward cash contracts, hedged to arrive contracts, then really you only want to include in that pre-harvest marketing plan those bushels that you're comfortable that you can produce. Now, in our plan, we use 5 increments, and we're pricing 20% in each of those, or 20%, 20%, 20%. In the fourth increment, 30%. That last increment, 10. We've got pricing targets. We start a little bit lower. We use $10 July CME hard wheat futures for that first increment. We used 11, then we went up 12, 13.50, and 14.50 for that final price target. Again, always bumping those up. The idea being that if prices rise, we just sell into that increasing, we stair-step our sales into rising prices. Obviously, if you've been looking at futures, you're seeing we're not doing that. And that's why we have date targets, right? So we said, hey, if we don't hit $10 July futures by February 1, we wanted to take action anyway. And we originally had thought $8 local cash price. Now we probably want to adjust that to $9, right? And again, the key thing here is, what is your minimum target price? So how's our plan coming along? Well, in October 1, July futures were at $9.60. And that's why we were in a strong uptrend, right? If you look back in September and August, we were seeing prices increasing as we go into October. And so we were using a price target of $10. Right, for our first increment. Well, we got there. We hit that on October 10. The close that day was $9.96. So we priced our first increment on October 10. At that time, we thought it was 20%. Again, as we adjust, that probably looks like maybe it was more like 27% of what we want to put in that marketing plan. Our next increment was another 20% of expected production there at $11, or by 3/15/23, which is today. Now, I think I checked again at noon. We were trading a little higher than this, but at that time, CME July wheat futures were 806. Now, if we look at, Hutchinson's new crop bid of 10 cents under, Hayes 44 cents under, Garden City 35 cents under, it would give us new crop forward bids of 796, 762, and 771. Obviously, all of those are below even our initial target price of 8, let alone our new target price of $9. So we don't take action, right? We're going to skip past this date, and we're not going to do anything, and we're looking for $11 futures, or at least at a point where we can maybe price at a cost that would not ensure loss. So at this point, at these prices, our plan, we would say take no action. If we look at our feed grain plan, which we would use, say, for corn or grain sorghum, again, ensure at 80%, including 80% of APH as those bushels to price. Bottom line, how many bushels are you pricing? Is it a 30-year production? Whatever. At this point, though, we haven't got this thing in the ground. I wouldn't make any changes to my plan at this point. I think we can be aggressive. We might get some good rains and produce an average crop. And then we also have our decision dates, March 15th, today being 1, April 15, May 15, June 15. I want to be done with this whole pre-harvest plan by July 15. So how are we progressing on our feed grain plan? We haven't priced anything at this point. January 1, we were at 607. And as you can see from the chart, we have never traded at that level since. We did get up there at 605, 606, maybe for a high We had a target of 610, so at that point in time, we didn't do anything. We are at 315 today. So, now the next thing we want to look at is, can we price profitably? Now, again, I checked at 10 CME December corn futures were at 556. And again, I'm just going to look at 3 locations across the state. Topeka, a 30-cent under basis for new crop bids. Salina, a 15-cent under. And again, this would be for corn. And Garden City, 45 cents over. So if we adjust those to get a new crop bid, we're looking at 526, 541, and 601. Topeka and Salina, neither one of those are offering me a price above my minimum price target. Garden City is. So, if it's working, maybe if people out in that western part, that southwestern part, if your costs are similar to that $5 area that we had, you may want to consider go ahead and get something on the board. For our plan, we probably say no, take no action. But if we can kind of see it, it looks like, maybe that 551 could hold. We bounced off of that. We're starting to trade a little higher. If we can get this market back up to 580, we probably want to go ahead and price that first increment. We don't like the price, but it would be above my cost of production at this point in time. And so if we can see, say, a 30-cent rise, 25-cent rise in prices, maybe we go ahead. But at this point in time, March 15th, this plan, we'd say don't do anything.
That's Mark Nelson, Director of Commodities for Kansas Farm Bureau and a presenter for the Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinars, co-sponsored by K-State's Department of Agricultural Economics. As for soybeans, Nelson says they have one increment at $13.99 and are waiting for a $14.20 price before taking any other action. In the next segment, K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien discusses his expectations for 2023. This is the K-State Radio Network. Agriculture Today continues now with highlights from Wednesday's Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinar with K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien and Mark Nelson, Director of Commodities for Kansas Farm Bureau. O'Brien says that everything is still tight in the grain markets with very little growth. He also says there could still be additional impact from ongoing and possible geopolitical conflict, as well as a carryover impact from crop production damage both globally and regionally.
Here in Kansas and the Western Plains, I see us really reflecting our situation more in our basis bids. Of course, this Western Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska has had a carryover impact in other parts of the country. Stronger corn, soybean basis, sorghum right in there throughout the U.S. Corn Belt. So really our question now, and Mark, you alluded to it, what with our depleted subsoil conditions, even with the moistures that we've had, what have we? Do we have better prospects now for spring, summer 2023 than we did several months ago? Probably in much of the state, yes. But the drought monitor maps still show depleted subsoil. So it's a great thing to get the moisture. I don't know that we can say we're completely saturated and out of the woods. Overall prospects, U.S. crop prices supported at moderate to high levels until someday grain markets become confident that we're actually going to have larger crops and rebuild stocks. So for Mark and I putting together marketing plans and having people hold us accountable for what we really think, until we answer that question, it seems that seasonally we'll hold up decently. When is that question answered? We get crops in the ground, we get underway, crops in the ground in May, usually get into June, uncertainty in July. If there's moisture there, then forward bids start to moderate, start to decline, late spring and on into fall harvest. In our workshops, we did show this to people. I did want to bring up that dry condition down in Argentina. You can see when those crops are supposed to come off and be harvested. So corn, mid-March now to early June. So they'll pull that crop off. They would normally bring that into world export markets to some degree. So that ought to be supportive of corn prices with export demand. We shall see. And you can see the Brazil crop is anticipated second crop to come in decently. That would come in March, June. That crop was late being planted. So if you push that back, latest number I'd seen, about 20% of the crop's extremely dry, late planted. So we've got some things happening in South America that might give us some pricing opportunities for old crop and maybe new crop this summer too. Right now, look at the soybean corn price ratio favoring beans. 13.25 November 23 soybeans, D's 556 corn, D's corn, and ratio 2.38. About 2.3 is neutral. The long-term average is 2.5, but cost of production has been trending different ways for these crops. And so right now you've got a little bit of favoring for soybeans. And, the USDA came out and said we're going to plant more corn, not beans. So this is the market's response to that. Likely strong new crop competition for 23 planted acres. You think we'd be seeing that right now. Well, you see that once the planters roll. And if we have dry conditions or wet, then you wonder, will you see the convulsive reactive markets that you often see? So right now, advantage soybeans. USDA reports, next reports, markets tend to be volatile around these things. April 8th, big report on May the 12th. That's the first projection for the 2023 harvest that comes out. There was an Ag Outlook conference. They had some general numbers, but you really don't, even with that, you don't see an actual in-the-field survey until the September report. You have a farmer survey in August. And you're looking for times when there's volatility, and we've picked our time frames for our decision discipline, I guess, in these markets. They're in middle parts of the month. We're trying to come after the WASDE reports, trying to come not directly dead on these prospective planning reports. And generally there's stocks reports those same dates. So the idea is that markets can be so volatile either way that you wonder, should you be making marketing plans on those days? If we have any dryness in Western Kansas, and by Western Kansas, I'm talking about from Salina west, then with the memory of what happened last year for basis fresh in our minds, you would wonder about just how the grain markets would respond in Kansas. And it affect all of Kansas and Nebraska, et cetera, if we start to see any threat to these crops, given the basis issues that we just had. If that comes about, if we do have weak production prospects this year, then inverted futures, strong basis, all that. We're not looking at that right now. We're expecting El Nino to come in and give us moisture. If it doesn't, then volatility galore. Mark, any comments from what you'd seen there that would be supportive or not of our the plans that we laid out?
Nothing specific. Like I said, I think you do a great job. And basically, as I listen to you, it's telling me if we've taken some action, let's all wait back and let's sit back a little bit here and see. The market is weakened so much that it's only soybeans were clearly offering us a profitable price, it looked like. And so, with stocks, as you described, the potential risks that are out there and obviously the weather risk, it's just way too early. It's good to maybe get some sales on the books, but I definitely do not want to get ahead of ourselves.
That seemed to be the case to me. I guess I sure respect traders who have money on the line and with the narratives that they're looking at, but it'll be good to get more data going forward to see if we have any of these risks to deal with and to actually, again, get into April, May, June, July, and see how these crops develop.
During the question and answer portion of the Winning the Game Grain marketing webinar, O'Brien and Nelson both tackled the question, what happens with the marketing plan if none of the sales targets are ever reached?
Part of our goal is to create a plan that's not going to do any harm, right? We want to create a plan that'll force me to action when the market provides the opportunities, but not a plan that's going to force me into marketing at a loss. And so that's why, getting that cost of production estimate in there. And so like I say, we're looking at wheat right now. If we would have started this in October, like we did, we've got 20% priced. When the market's not offering a profitable price, we sure don't want to do anything pre-harvest. At that point, I guess basically, Dan and I were telling people in our workshops, we're better off. Let's get it cut. If you can store it, see if you can make some money at harvest or post-harvest. But you definitely, in your pre-harvest plan, don't want to put yourself in a position that you're pricing at a loss. And so if we see this market, let's say for wheat, continue lower and it never offers us, well, then we're not going to have that one increment sold. That would be how we would implement this plan. And we grabbed a few cents when we had the opportunity, but we didn't want to make any mistakes.
And in so many words, we're going to, for those bushels, expand the pricing window to harvest and beyond. Given the volatility and tightness of world markets, see what opportunities come down the line. But the idea being not to lock in anything that doesn't help us financially.
If we got a second here, I would also just toss in on that question, because I guess really what it was really getting at is do we ever consider pricing at or below our cost of production. Typically we always had one slide that would hit on that if we had time to hit on it in the workshops. But again, that's a very personal question that everybody's got to answer. Is it worth locking in a price that, hey, I think it is a loss, but maybe is it better to lose 20 cents today than watch this market deteriorate another 70 cents? And at the end of the day, I'm losing 70 cents. At this point, and I sure would toss that to Dan, but with the uncertainty out there, I'd hate to take a lot of action. But I think, as Dan did his outlook, he kind of alluded, and I'll let him just hit this. We are going to hit a point in time when the market is going to make this decision that, yeah, we're good. We know what the wheat crop looks like. We know what the corn looks like. It's in good shape. The soybeans are they're in good shape, and it could head south. Now, when is that date? That's a tough one. I think it's too early right now, for sure. But yeah, there may come a time that maybe the market's not offering a profit, but we feel like, yes, it could head south because everything's pretty certain.
And I think we're getting at the seasonal psychology of grain markets that has given us these patterns over various years. Again, why do we tend to hold up into June and then fall off into July and then August for the reasons that was talked about? Mark, if you don't mind, there was a statement to keep in mind: the cost of ownership for owning grain in an elevator has been changed by higher interest rates. We did in our in-person workshops here have a lot of discussion about how interest rates are coming into play, affecting hitch to arrive contracts, the fees that some elevators charge that. Again, their elevators holding grain for a period of time. They're paying interest on that. Any thoughts?
If I do nothing, because it looks like it's not offering me a profit right now. And again, our goal of our pre-harvest plan is not to do any harm. But again, is it better to lock in what appears at first blush to be a 10, 15, 20 cent loss because we're fearful that I don't want to end up with a lot of grain unpriced at harvest that I've given in the bin and now I'm paying interest on? And that is a real risk. But again, that's one of those, if you feel comfortable doing those things, that's a good thing. I think definitely you need to be, you need to have your marketing team. That's, probably your broker, the significant contributors, partners in your organization, but likely to your banker, because they're going to want to know why you're pricing at a loss or a potential loss. And as Ward was sitting on, there is that time where, yes, maybe it's a rational thing to do to lock in a small loss for fear of a larger loss later.
That's Mark Nelson, Director of Commodities for Kansas Farm Bureau, and K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. They presented a Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinar on Wednesday. To view the entire presentation, visit agmanager.info. This is Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We end this week's programming with a look at Kansas agricultural weather with K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, as we've had some rain late in the week, it's also an opportunity, though, to talk about the fact that the drought monitor has been updated this week, and I'm imagining there's probably not been a whole lot of change.
Yeah, we're seeing average precipitation increase on a weekly basis, but that does not help with the drought monitor if we're getting average or less of precipitation. As you get further into spring, those averages continue to increase, and in weeks without precipitation, we can expect some degradation in areas that might have even seen some recent improvement. So some changes this week was an expansion of drought in central Kansas of both severe and extreme into central regions. And then we also saw some small areas of improvement in the Flint Hills region where they got lucky with some moisture last week. So overall, changes were small, but as you go forward, we're starting to see drying out across the state. And if we don't get some moisture in here soon, we're going to probably start to see degradation start to increase again.
The precipitation that we've seen late in the week, will that have much of an impact at all?
As we record this, precipitation amounts have been pretty much less than a tenth of an inch, with a few areas seeing 5 to 6/100ths of an inch. So not a big impact. Average precipitation on the daily basis in the Manhattan area, just for an example, is around 7/100ths of an inch. So when you put that over the whole week, we're averaging less than half an inch, about 4/10ths of an inch of rain a week. That's a lot of moisture when we think about going 1 or 2 weeks without wetting rain. So this will be very little, not even enough to meet our daily averages, and starting to accumulate those deficits once again, unfortunately.
So along those same lines, then, the fire potential still remains high.
Yeah, we have seen an increase in wind over the last week. It's been very windy, and with the conditions drying out, despite cooler than normal temperatures at times, we're definitely starting to see an increase in fire weather concerns just because the fuels are really dry and they're dormant still. And any wind is going to help fire move very effectively, and couple the fact that grass is still standing in a lot of places where we didn't have enough snow to mat it down. It increases spotting potential as a result, and so the dryness is more likely to fuel a more aggressive fire behavior that's harder to suppress, especially a concern as we move forward into prescribed burning season, which is pretty much here, and definitely increases the concern, too, of rekindles the next day and struggling to control those prescribed fires.
For those gardeners, I imagine that they're concerned about soil temperature because we've had some very extreme lows this week, and for the most part, the highs have been below normal.
Yeah, so temperature-wise this week, we started the week out below normal, and we actually peaked on Wednesday with very warm temperatures across the state, much above normal by 10 to even 15 degrees. But we're falling right back to below normal as this airs on Friday. And soil temperatures have been bouncing around a little bit as a result of that. But overall, the 7-day averages are still running a degree or two above normal for the state, where our 7-day averages for the southeast are the warmest, obviously, because it's a warmer climate. But we're talking mid to upper 40s, and we even saw some 50 degrees at the 2-inch level this week. As you get further north and west, those temperatures fall off into the upper 30s, but that's not nearly enough to get anything in the ground. And it was tempting when it warmed up to plant, but this is spring, and we bounce around from colder than normal to warmer than normal, and we're going to keep doing that. And so our average soil temperatures are going to slow down and definitely moderate as we get towards the end of the month, especially with the upcoming forecast.
Well, let's talk about that. What does the outlook seem like?
Saturday, tomorrow, will be our coldest day in a while. Average highs in Manhattan area, at least, are in the upper 50s, and our average lows as of today are the freezing mark. That's our average low for this day. And so anything below freezing is below normal. We're not going to get above freezing possibly on Saturday for most of the state. And as we move forward, that'll be the coldest day. As we move forward, we'll see temperatures gradually increasing. We'll get back to above normal by midweek. Sound familiar? And then we'll see another potent storm system Wednesday into Thursday, most likely, that drops the temperatures for the following weekend. So we're in a repetitive trend where we're fluctuating, but overall we'll be below normal temperatures skewed by several days that are going to be much below normal.
That's K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.